Welcome to Godly Conversations. Today Cliffe will be debating on how Christ is the true God. This clip is taken from Give Me an Answer. Let's jump straight into the video.
But what about salvation? Why God already knows who's going to be saved and who isn't, so why is that not predetermined?
Good. For the same reason that God knows what I'm going to choose to do tomorrow when it comes to how I treat students out here, because he's outside of the dimension of time. God knows whether I'm going to choose to accept Christ and put my faith in him. And he knows that about you and about all of us. He's all-knowing. He's outside of the dimension of time. The idea that I'm just going to keep on living and living and living is a joke. I'm 69 years old. I can promise you I can't run as fast as I used to. I can't jump as high as I used to. This body is decaying. That's a fact, right?
Yeah.
So I am locked into time, and time does things to my body. Time does things to life. God is outside of that dimension of time. He's eternal.
All right.
See, God doesn't get tired. I get tired. God doesn't get tired.
The four Gospels are the story of Jesus, and we want to make sure it's accurate. How come there's some inconsistencies between the four of them? For example, the one I'm thinking of is like the story of the fig tree. Jesus curses a fig tree, and one gospel says it withered immediately, and then one gospel said later on in the day it was withered. So there's some, and there's another one with like the genealogy of Christ. There's two different genealogies, and they're different.
Yep.
So how can we still trust the gospel if there's those inconsistencies?
Good question. When you talk about inconsistencies, read them carefully. Realize that perspective is crucial. You and I are standing on a street corner. We see two cars come down the road. There's a screech of brakes. A woman screams, and there's a collision. If you and I go to the police and you say, "Officer, I saw the two cars coming down the street. A woman screamed and there was a collision." And I say, "Officer, I saw the two cars coming down the street. I heard a screech of brakes and there was a collision." Are you and I contradicting each other?
No.
No. Exactly. We are offering two equally valid perspectives on what really happened. There's a book called The Day Lincoln Was Shot. Does that book record every second of Lincoln's last 24 hours? Every thought, every imagination, every deed?
I would imagine.
No. What is history? History is a selective account of what happens. No history book gives us every detail. None. That is why we want different eyewitness accounts to get different perspectives on what really happened. Now, if you have a contradiction in a text, then we have got a problem. But I would argue that the two genealogies in Luke 3 and Matthew 1 do not contradict each other. There are some options. One option that I take seriously is, one of Luke's main points is, Jesus was not born literally, physically, as a son of Joseph. He was born of a virgin, Mary. And so Luke gives us Mary's genealogy, tracing back to Abraham, and Matthew gives us Joseph's genealogy, tracing back to Abraham, showing that clearly from both Mary's lineage and Joseph's lineage, Jesus was the line of Messiah. The fig tree, when you have words like immediately or at the end of the day, be very careful there. Very careful. Right? I mean, immediately, what does immediately mean? Mark continuously in the Gospel of Mark says, and immediately, right away, Jesus went and did this. Well, that doesn't mean that he literally just right away went and did that. Mark is a writer who uses a lot of action, and Jesus is bopping around. He's writing for Romans, who are action-oriented people, and so Mark records that.
Well, and also, the disciples had different perspectives, right? There wasn't collusion going on. They weren't always in the same place at the same time. So one gospel writer could say, I heard it happened immediately, but for me, it was later on in the day. So remember that. I love that because it's not collusion. It's like the angels at the tomb. right? Just because somebody says there was an angel at the tomb and somebody comes along and says, I saw 2 angels, doesn't mean they're contradicting themselves. It just means the guy who came later or the woman who came later encountered 2 and the first guy only had encountered 1 and talked about the 1 and didn't talk about the second. So that type of difference, see, if you had a certain holy book that says this is given by God and every single word has to be perfect, there's no male or female perspective on things, humanity is not in here. See, that is way tougher when it comes to looking at things like supposed contradictions or supposed sloppiness. Because don't forget, there are thousands upon thousands of variants that are misspelled grammatically in the Bible. And that can scare people's faith. But then you look at it, and not a single theological issue is changed by those variants. And so I love the different perspectives that appear to be contradictions at times, but then you understand, no, these are different people from different perspectives, so that's important, rather than everybody just saying, yep, here we go, it was 3 o'clock and we were all here at the fig tree and this is exactly what happened and we're going to write it in the exact same way with the exact same punctuation. Then you start to say, wow, this probably did not happen.